We're excited to start. In Kol Atchalot Kashot, beginnings are always difficult, but so is also getting to the point where you finally hear the divine telling you that it's time to write the book that you kept telling other people, that you weren't aware of the book they were looking for existed, and then you finally heard the call to write this book, Yiscah. So it's really great to be with Rabbi Yiscah, really beloved, amazing Yiscah. Welcome to this conversation. It's so good to have you.
Wow, thank you so much, David. I am so grateful and excited and just living in the moment and going with the flow. Yes.
I just want to start by saying that this format of having conversations with really amazing, and fascinating people is something that I've always been excited to do, and I've been, doing it more frequently now with this podcast. And I'm looking forward to inviting you to be in a longer format to talk about your life journey, which we'll touch on a little bit in the next hour or so. But just to begin with, the title of the book, this incredible book, uh, is about planting seeds, and the image of there it is, planting seeds of the divine, and it's like such a beautiful cover. Who's the cover artist on that?
The cover artist is Lauren Baschianti from upstate New York.
So beautiful.
JPS, my managing editor, Joy Weinberg, found this beautiful piece and contacted the artist. And
Beautiful.
yeah, it really
Well,
is.
I mean, the organic nature, right? The connection to the organic world and to the image of a garden, of course, is purposeful, as this book was an outgrowth, as it were, literally, of the garden teachings. And can you tell a little bit about how this book came about, like the background behind the book and the teachings that you were offering in your garden, and and that voice that you heard?
Yeah, so I love answering that question because that's the foundation. About 8 years ago, no, I think about, okay, 7, 8 years ago, I started offering to closer friends and students in Jerusalem, where I live in the Nachlaot neighborhood, an alternative prayer space, because I myself, except for going to the renewal Kabbalat Shabbat with Rabbi Ruth Gagan, which is once a month, I really was not connecting in the regular synagogue service. And when I say that, it doesn't matter whether there's a mechitzah, the barrier, the divider between men and women, or whether it was egalitarian. I was searching myself decades for decades to have an experience where I would be transformed. As Reb Zalman teaches us, when you walk out of the synagogue, if you haven't been transformed, you haven't prayed. And I wanted to be transformed, meaning I wanted to sense a closeness to the divine that would be as a result of whatever it is I was doing in my practice. So rather than just complain, I decided to do something about it. I felt it was a calling, and I established once a month this alternative prayer space. And people come from all over. Some are more observant, some are less observant, some are living in Israel, some are visiting. And over the 8 years, what I do is I teach a short teaching that have to do with the parsha through the lens of spiritual text, and then we chant, we sing together. Then I guide everyone into a meditation. Then we share, and from time to time, people have asked me, "Is there a book that we can buy that models something like this?" Because we're going back to California, or a student is going back to finish, rabbinical school, or I live in London, but I really want so, and I always would say, not yet, not yet, not yet. And then in 2020 and 2022, yeah, in 2022, in January, I was on a trip with Pardes with David Bernstein and a few students and another faculty member. We were at the grave sites of the PSS Rebbe, Rabbi Kalanimus Kama Shapira, whose writings have profoundly inspired me. He perished in the Holocaust. But he had the opportunity to bury his wife, who passed away 2 years before the war started, his son, and his mother. And I felt paying homage and respect to him. The closest I could get to be where he was at these grave sites. He was murdered and buried in a mass grave. We don't even know exactly where. But while I was there reading on his wife's stone, he was honoring her memory to the public by saying every day she was his chavruta in Zohar, and she would review all his manuscripts. And I'm looking at this saying, this is a Hasidic Rebbe with such amazing spiritual Torah, honoring his wife like this. All of a sudden, I felt this calling inside. Yiscah, it's time. It's like he's telling me it's time to go back to Yerushalayim and start the book.
So a couple of things in here that I think that maybe listeners might hear and wonder what it is. So chavruta is a study partner. So you're essentially saying that you were at the gravesite of this great Hasidic Rebbe, Columbus Kalma Shapira of Piazetzner. He was known also as the Warsaw Ghetto Rebbe. He was one of the only teachers whose writings we have or his sermons were written down during the period of the Warsaw Ghetto and the war. And when you went to visit, the only grave that was available to visit, because of course he died in Treblinka, he didn't have a grave, and he at the grave of his wife, it said that he studied Zohar, he studied the mystical work of the Zohar from the 13th century with his wife, which is a pretty remarkable thing. And so you felt a kinship with him, that he was, as it were, in some way telling you that it was time for you to write down some of these things. And
Yes.
yeah, and um, the I think that it's really, I just kind of come back for those who don't know that there is such a thing as spiritual Torah versus regular Torah. When we speak of Torah, we don't just mean the actual five books of Moses. We mean actually the lessons that are gleaned from the Torah. A Torah can be, to say Torah, you don't just mean, right, the actual five books. You mean the lessons from it, or the commentaries on it, or the vast storehouse of commentary on the Torah. And I know for me, I, you know, I think we both know that you can listen to someone giving an explanation of a Torah or of the Torah, or an explanation of the story in the Torah, and it doesn't necessarily nourish your soul. It doesn't necessarily give you the calories you need spiritually to give you fuel for the world. And there's something about um, people might have hard people might not know that, right? That there's kind of different kinds of Torah. And so you're just, if you could elucidate it and just explain and give an example perhaps of what is the kind of Torah that you needed more of, that led you to start your garden group that would come together from everywhere just to be nourished. You mentioned our colleague, Rabbi Ruth Gan Kagan, who started what's called a renewal community in Jerusalem. Renewal Judaism is one of the smaller movements in the United States, and kind of started by our teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, of blessed memory, who was a student of Chabad, of Lubavitch, and then started his own unique brand of, I guess we call it Neo-Hasidism, we call it renewal. But Rabbi Ruth Gan Kagan in Jerusalem has a beautiful once a month renewal style, heart opening chanting group, and you wanted more. So what was it, Yiscah, that you wanted more of, and what did you give in that context?
Well, I guess you just said it, heart opening. I love text. I have a creative mind, a critical thinking mind. I like to cultivate a crisp, clear mind. And I very much honor the intellectual grappling with the text. However, that's a beginning. That's not the end for me. I learn in order to be in a relationship with the deeper part of myself and the deeper part of everyone around me, which we call in Hebrew the Shekhinah, or the dwelling, the indwelling presence, my soul, that inner voice that I access through intuitiveness. So many of the teachings that I learned over decades really responded to the external way of doing Jewish. A lot of the Jewish law, a lot of the Jewish rituals, a lot of the Jewish, observances. And in terms of behavior, it was quite extensive. I needed, though, not necessarily instead of that, I wanted to believe that that was a manifestation, an expression, a revelation of something going on inside, something less physical, not so much related to behavior, but much more addressing consciousness or attitude or a sense of. So I like to say I needed to do Jewish less and be Jewish more.
So do Jewish less and be Jewish more, and but or even be human through like through
Oh,
Judaism. So it's a very
yeah.
human book. So it's just, can you give us a sense before we talk about the audience and who the audience might be? Because you kind of beautifully articulated, right? Wanting to both grapple with text from the place of intellectual inquiry, critical thinking, but also that there are certain questions that, when asked, it will reveal a different dimension of the text, a dimension of the text that might speak not just to making sense or behavioral change, but something that touches the soul or the psycho-spiritual dimension. Can you give a listener an example of like the difference between a teaching or a Torah that would be like, oh, that's interesting, or that's edifying, or that's like, that's like, I'm gonna lead a different life because of that teaching, and then split screen, that teaching touches my heart. That teaching changes the way I think and feel and be, as you said, in the world. Can you give us a little example?
Yes, very much so. So I just taught at Romamu, where you lead in your other position. You're the leading rabbi, and I was able to meet Rabbi Diane, and uh, it was just so wonderful yesterday. I shared two teachings, and they had to do with this past week's Parsha, Ba'alotecha, which in this Torah portion, we learn about being given a second chance. And it was a type of mitzvah that came from the bottom up rather than from the top down. I won't go into all the details, but it introduced a holiday called Pesach Sheni, which allowed people who, for specific reasons, were not able to offer the offering on the actual anniversary of coming out of Egypt. They were able to offer it a month later because of the legal state they were in, ritually wise, they were ineligible. So they complained and they asked, can there be another way to handle this? We feel excluded. And Rashi brings a beautiful midrash that this shows when Moses responded and said, wow, let me talk to God and see, let me talk to the boss, so to speak, and we'll see what the divine will is here. And in fact, God very much supported that and instituted another mitzvah, all because people who felt excluded protested in a gentle way, but in a firm way. Rashi brings down that this shows the comfort and the closeness that Moses had with God, that Moses could bring this to God. And the Chizkuni brings down that because of the words in the verse, it's not only for those people in the wilderness, but for future generations if they ever felt excluded. And that's why there's the word in the future generations. Okay, very nice. What did I learn? I learned something very nice, that there was a mitzvah, usually 611, come from the top down. And besides one other, this came from activism, from spiritual activism, from below up, then to go up, from bottom up. I could close the Chumash at that point and say, I feel so blessed that I belong to a people who recognize the pain of when people feel excluded and comfortable enough to bring it to God then 3,400 years ago, but also to their descendants, the 13th century commentator in France, Chizkuni. But what does that have to do with me? In 2025, I live in Israel, and there were no more ritual observances of offering the Paschal lamb offering. So what does it say for my soul? Not my, I get it with my mind and I like it and I'm attracted to it and I honor it. But how does that inform my ongoing or hope what I'm seeking to be an ongoing relationship with God? Well, it also means in my own life, in my students' lives, in my children's lives, my community members' lives, in your life, what do I do when I feel excluded? What, how do I, how, what happens to me inside? What feelings does comes up from that? And how do I respond to other people excluding me? Do I just shy away and say, I guess so? Or do I protest? Or do I meditate? Like the fact that I can grapple with it, it almost it just brings the text from 3,400 years ago. It brings it so alive because today I see this so much loneliness, so much polarization, so much anger. And a lot of it has to do with people feeling excluded by others, I definitely see this in the Jewish world. Letza'ari, as we say in Hebrew, to my pain. And I see it in the larger world that many people feel excluded by other people for all sorts of reasons. We in the Jewish tradition, we have a modality, we have a way, we have a practice of taking those feelings and going to our inner self and say, God, this is unacceptable. I don't want to be excluded. What do I have to do to be included? What does that mean? And I'm not here to give answers. That depends on the individual journey. But that's an example of when I want to be close to my creator, to the Shekhinah within me, I'm not going to let any human being exclude me. The way the people 3,400 years ago protested to Moses. That's an
Okay, so
example.
an example, and in your book, would you just describe for the readers like that move from a kind of interesting tradition or teaching about the ancient ritual of the Paschal Lamb, which was, of course, the beginning of, I guess, citizenship or Jewish identity, or we call Israelite identity, was such a seminal moment that the Bible says that those who, for no fault of their own, were unable to participate in that ritual were then given a second chance, as Pesach Sheni, as you said, a number, Paschal 2, a second Passover, and then a month later in the next month. That becomes for you then a prism through which to discuss or to feel into ways that people are excluded for no reason of other than the fact that for all kinds of reasons. So then that becomes an inner inquiry for you, like, okay, how do I respond to the sensation or the experience of being excluded? And do you then lead people through? I know that in the book, as I read it, it was you can just share this with people that every one of the Torah portions, what you call the parsha, every one of the Torah portions of the week, the weekly reading, is connected to I guess, what's called a middah, or quality within us. And so, can you walk us through how you would enact? How did you enact it this weekend? I mean, I was off this weekend; I didn't get a chance to experience it. But walk us through how you might take somebody through that particular teaching about feeling excluded and interrogating that experience. How would you lead people?
Well, the first thing I did, and I do in the book, is after I discuss the what we call the Peshat, the basic medieval commentaries, like I just presented, I then bring in some of the Hasidic and the Neo-Hasidic understandings, which address how this affects the soul. And what I did was from two different people, Rabbi Avraham Aryeh Trugman, who's a contemporary spiritual teacher in Israel, and also the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe before the most recent Rebbe, they each contributed um, a teaching that has to do with the health, with the vibrancy of our soul. Rabbi Trugman says that when the desire is so strong enough to draw close to God or to be in a relationship, nothing ultimately stands in the way. And to really believe that, and he even quotes the Talmud where it says nothing stands in the way of will. And I think that's a very important for people today, for myself and my journey. And I think for everyone, I see this with my children, my adult children, some of my older grandchildren, the honoring the deeper will to be a healthier, more a holistic person where mind, body, heart, and soul are functioning as one unit. And I'm speaking now not just to the Jewish world, this is to humanity. Instead of feeling like inner fragmentation, we can have a sense of wholeness by me recognizing, well, what is it I really want? And then the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, he coined the phrase, it's never too late. It's never too late. Do I really believe that? Well, if my spiritual parent, I'm known to teach that we have three parents, not two. We have a biological mother and father, and we have a third parent who gave us our soul. And if my third parent says that I have a second chance, I want to believe that. I want to believe that I can do that. So in my own journey, which I shared with the people in Romamu yesterday, when I entered the ultra-Orthodox world, I felt after 15 years, I almost felt like my mind, and there's no blaming here, it's how I experienced it. I didn't feel my crisp, clear, creative mind was really encouraged to think critically for myself, and nor to feel whatever my feelings were. And when I left that world, because I didn't feel closer to the divine, I didn't at all. Actually, I felt further away. So then I prayed. I really prayed hard on my 50th birthday. It was a very lonely day in my life. And I used that as the opportunity. I can't do this alone. I really do. I want to be close to God. Call out to God instead of the rabbis. And I'm not
Mm.
exaggerating. I thought of Pesach Sheni. I thought of this teaching that I had learned over the decades. And I said, you know what? It's not too late. I get a second chance. I cried out to God, and I will tell you, David, that this was the first time. I was 50. It's 20, almost 24 years ago. My birthday's in a couple of weeks. It's the first time I would say I really felt a religious experience. I really felt I somehow there was an encounter with the divine energy within me. And that divine energy said, it's like the still small voice. I've been waiting for you to include me in your journey. You've gone to this rabbi, this rabbi, that. And with all due respect to the rabbis, I've been waiting for you to call out to me. Hold my hand. I'll take you where you have to go.
Mm.
All that. So I've given like the more intellectual, the spiritual, my own journey. And then what I did with people of Romamu, and I have this in every portion, I shared a visualization with them. Imagine when you feel excluded and do, and then imagine, pause, receive a few breath cycles. Now imagine when you feel included. What is that like? So it's an imminent, visceral experience as well.
Would you recommend, and I want to come back to your the still small voice, the kol damamad daka that you referenced about your own personal journey, and it's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Do you envision that the readers, I mean, I loved reading your book, and I mean, for me to go through all of the different levels of engagement with the text, both intellectual and rigor, but and in, neo-Hasidic or other modalities of psycho-spiritual application or questions that disclose that this too can be relevant for your neshama, for your heart, for your soul. All of that I love because I almost always will feel pulled in various ways when I'm encountering, a book on Torah. It's either heavily heady or too academic, or I love it, but I feel like, okay, after I finish reading that, okay, I'm gonna go read something else that's a little bit more emotionally moving, opening. So I loved it's very integrative. Do you imagine for the reader as someone who will take a visualization from this week's Torah portion and continue it for 30 days or for X amount of time? Is there anything prescriptive in that way, or just kind of like follow me along, year after year, this will be a part of your experience of Bahalotcha and like do this Bahalotcha style exclusion visualization and do you have a kind of an agenda for this? And also I want to ask you, I mean, it's clear that someone like me with a lot of background loves your book. How do you imagine people who don't have a background will experience the
Um,
book?
so great, two questions. Let's
Mhm.
go the first and the second. So what I also add, and this is role modeling to the reader, each portion I also share my Torah, which my publisher, JPS, Jewish Publication Society, that's one of the reasons they found my manuscript worthy of showing a lot more attention with the possibility of publishing this. Because I bring this, I bring that, and then I bring me.
Mm,
So, what I encourage, and I say this in my introduction, I encourage the reader, whomever they are, wherever they are, to come up with their own interpretation. I value that. I encourage that. That to me is a living Torah. And JPS acknowledged to me that they heard and they saw through my writing how I honor our history, but I don't live in it. I
mm.
live in the present. And I live in a very different present than, let's say, the 13th century in France. So that's one thing I do. That's one step I take is through my own Torah, encourage the reader to do the same. Now, in terms of the visualizations, the book can be read in the table of contents, not the entire book. If you look at the table of contents, you could read it left to right or right to left, meaning it can be a Parsha book, a Torah portion of the week book, Or you can extract, as I have done for each portion, a certain quality trait, a spiritual gem that raises consciousness. So let's say it's 6 months from now. A reader goes through some type of situation where they feel excluded. Let me see if Yiscah has something to write. So they get to this parsha, which we read in June, but they're reading about the middah, about the jewel, so they can read it that way. And then the visualization can be used. And I like to see it as a spiritual toolbox. They may resort to that tool 3 months from now, or 6 months, or maybe not for another 2 years. That's one way I can answer your first question.
Love it.
Yes.
Second.
Second question. Uh, the reason I wrote the way I did, meaning all English, very little Hebrew, whatever Hebrew, of course, was transliterated and explained, is because I cast a very wide target audience. Within the Jewish world, Orthodox Jews who haven't learned spiritual texts. And there's a lot, there's more than probably that have. Also, Jewish educators, rabbis who want to introduce to their communities a spiritual practice, as that's becoming more popular. Also, to Jewish people who have alternative practices, like in many ways, you and I. Right? We're halachically informed, but not necessarily halachically defined. And then Jewish people who have a sensitivity to the spirit, to the non-physical, and don't realize that the Jewish tradition has a wealth to offer. I also have audiences in the non-Jewish world, theologians, ministers, priests, imams, even if I could even say that now, right? Uh,
Certainly can.
yes, thank you. Indigenous tribal chiefs who understand that different peoples have different ideas of spirituality. And then non-theologians, not necessarily anyone who's affiliated with any type of religion or any type of spiritual discipline, but is seeking some type of spiritual meaning, especially in the world today with so much confusion. And I won't go on and on with all the spiritual maladies. And I will tell you, a week ago, after I already arrived in the States, my publicist sent to me another book review by a Texas minister in Dallas. She sent out advanced review copies to a few theologians because she knew I want to appeal to that audience as well. He wrote an amazing review of my book as a Christian minister. And his summary was, I think it's really important for Christian people to read Yiscah Smith's book because it reminds us how much we don't know about what they call the Old Testament and the Jewish approach to God. I was like, I cried. I cried. And at the same time, I
You,
have,
you cried. You cried
I
because
cried,
you reached someone.
yes, I reached someone in my target audience.
Hmm.
I also have received emails from family members, from different people, different students of mine, who really are not that even pulled to follow that much in the Jewish tradition. And reading my book or excerpts from my book, I want to read more of this. This is really fascinating. I didn't know Judaism had this. I mean, David, I spoke to a group of sisterhood ladies on the Upper East Side at Temple Israel of New York City. They invited me to be their their scholar at their annual end of the year sisterhood meeting, and they close it with an invited guest. I had about 30 women sitting. By the time I was finished, they were on the edge of their chairs. They said, "We've never at a Reformed temple, it could be an Orthodox little synagogue or a big one. These are new ideas. This is a Torah of compassion, of connection, of inclusivity, not exclusivity. And I hope I strive with all my target audiences to shake up a little, lehitoloreh, we say in Hebrew. So that's how I answer your second question.
Well, I love the answers. I have I can imagine that you were influenced by so many different people, and you mentioned already Reb Zalman of blessed memory, and you mentioned you know the Piazetzner, so I guess masters who are living. were contemporary or were passed on but relatively recently, and those who were in the past kind of in the footsteps of. So, in the context of your story, which I want to hear a little bit more about in terms of the still small voice and how, so much of your personal narrative is about, learning to listen to yourself and learning to listen to your own voice and discovery and authenticity and being truthful. Um, can you, before you take us into your story, can you just name a couple of them? The Piazetzner you mentioned. Who else had a major influence on you as a teacher, as a student of Torah?
Well, the early Hasidic masters, the definitely the what's called the Alter Rebbe, Rebbe Shneur Zalman of La'adi, who became known as the first Rebbe of Chabad, of seven
Right.
Rebbe's. His book, the Tanya, especially with Rami Shapiro's commentary. I learned Tanya years ago when I
Hmm.
was in Chabad, and relearning it with Rami Shapiro's insights, and I have taught it through his lens. It really is a foundational book for me, and
Hmm.
especially there's a group of chapters from 26 to 32 that are just remarkable. Also, the more Einayim, the Chernobyl Rebbe. I mean, Rabbi Twersky, the first Rabbi Twersky, what he does with a parsha, it's he. I mean, he died even before going into the 18th. I mean, he died at the end of the 1700s, at the end of the 18th century, and he had such what we would call today progressive ideas about claiming a unique, a very private personal relationship with our Creator. Reb Simcha Bunim profoundly has inspired me. I mean, one of his great phrases that this is one of the reasons I left that world was what he was pushing back on in the 19th century in Pruszyska in Poland. Like, you don't come to a Rebbe to lose yourself. You come to a Rebbe so the Rebbe could help you find yourself.
Hmm.
And that just struck me. That is informed so much of my own Torah journey that I
So,
need.
so, so, yeah. So tell us a little bit. You've been kind of dropping little nuggets here. Anyone who's on the call probably knows a little bit about your background. It's somewhat clear, from what you've said that you were in that world. You said in that world. So tell us a little bit about your story, and as as far back as you want to go, and both Jewish and personal, a little bit as much as you'd like to share, just so we can get a sense of how the Torah of planting seeds is also your Torah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I came in my early 20s. I had first visited Israel for the first time in 1971, and I fell in love. And
Did
I
you come
remember
from an Orthodox family, or
not
where
at
did you
all.
come from? Not at all.
I came from a very loving home on Long Island, and brought up in the 1950s, baby boomer, two siblings, wonderful parents. Until my mom passed away 10 years ago, my parents lit up each time each other walked in the room. I mean, really, like the ideal, like why can't we live like that now type of life? And they actually taught me a lot of values that I learned later in Pirkei Avot, an Ethics of the Fathers, which is a book about ethics and morality. So on one hand, I came from a very religious home when it came to morality and ethics, just not the observant of the ritual. And life, my own, backpacking through Europe brought me to Israel. And one of the reasons I loved coming, that I fell in love with Israel, oh, I could be like a proud Jew and I don't have to be religious. I mean, I saw like all kinds of
Hmm.
people that were like, from all ages doing the army and just it really enthralled me. I came back and started learning at GW University in DC, more electives that have to do with like the prophets, the Bible, Hebrew, and I really was drawn towards it. And then I went to do a master's in Jewish education at JTS in New York, Jewish Theological Seminary. And at the same time, though, I wanted more about God. I want to hear more. I want to learn more about God, not just our tradition, but I wasn't hearing enough God talk, a lot of rabbi talk. So I thought, well, maybe if I go into with the Hasidic people, since they talk a lot about God, so I thought that's where I would come closer to God. But what I brought into that world was a very troubling, major contradiction, which I never thought would ever be resolved. There were three parts of me that I thought were irreconcilable. One, I wanted to honor to the degree that I would learn about my tradition, my tradition. Two, I wanted to do it where I honored my soul. Like I wanted the spiritual meanings. I didn't want to just like, this is how you keep kosher. I mean, I didn't, that's not what brought me into traditional Jew. I want to know how that brings me close to my soul. And then to be my authentic self. And I was not always honest about who I am, who I was, what brought me. There was a lot of inner conflict. I had to do, a lot had to do with gender, identity dysphoria. It had to do with expectations that were put on me by my society. It had to do with my own low self-esteem and my own insecurities. So I was ripe. I was ripe to be manipulated without any malintent to be. I let myself be manipulated. And what that did, I can't tell you how painful that was when my children were young, living in the old city, in the Rova, the Jewish quarter in the old city. I would take all the kids to the wall, the Western Wall, the Kotel every Friday night. And there's a verse we say, there's a sentence we say in our Shabbat prayers. Purify our hearts so we can be with you in this relationship of service in truth. And I would get a knot in my stomach because I didn't feel I was honoring my tradition. I was not honoring my soul, and I was not honoring my authentic self. So I basically said, God, if you're really there, you know that this is not sustainable. And if you're not there, then I really don't know why I'm doing this. And that led to me leaving. And then when I left, it was like
Over a long, how long a period of time?
I left for 10 years. After
To
15, I left observant traditional Judaism for 10 years. And I will tell you, it was one of the best decisions I made. I wouldn't be here now with the excitement and the exuberance and the commitment living a Judaism that I originally thought I would experience when I came into it. And it's anything but typically traditional, which is part of why I love it. I get to curate it, I get to be a part of it. But what happened during those 10 years, I don't know, maybe to some of the listeners, this will make sense. I couldn't live in the traditional world, but it was hard to live not in the traditional world. like, like really, this was a total,
nicht,
this is a total existential crisis here.
yeah,
Like,
nicht,
I,
nicht dahin, nicht daher. You couldn't be here, you couldn't
exactly.
be there.
Yeah,
You were posech b'shtei sifim. You were like caught
nachon,
between two different
right. Yeah.
realities of.
And finally, that day came when I called in, called up, called out, and I felt the divine presence for the first time. And she guided me, it guided me, he guided me along a path that was very, very different than the Judaism I live now. And I remember the first night that I lit the Neirot Shabbat, the Shabbat lights. It's a tradition that when the person lights, they spend a moment. Some people have this tradition. They spend a moment with some private prayers. And this was my one prayer that first night. God, please don't allow me, guide me away from the world I left, because if I go back into it, I'll leave again, and I probably will never come back. And for all those years now, it's been many, many years, I have been coming back. I've been returning in this renewal, neo-Hasidic, post-denominational, where, like I say, I'm informed, but not defined by. And I rely on my teachers, I rely on my family, I rely on my students, and I rely on me. And I've never felt closer. I've never felt closer to the divine. And it's a Judaism that's alive, that's creative, that really honors our history and also honors at the same time my future, the legacy for my children and grandchildren.
So before we shift to your legacy for your children and grandchildren, I just wanted to say that there was a woman here, I think it's a woman, Penelope Coven, Koven, who wanted to communicate to you that she's a former neighbor in Seattle, and she was delighted to know about your spiritual journey and about your book. I would love to connect more. I'll reach out through the website. P.S. and a former gardener too. So there you
Oh,
go. Another a gardener was with us. Your legacy for your children and grandchildren. So I think that the United States, we're now in a moment here, I think in the United States, more maybe globally, where isolation and social isolation in particular has reached, levels that people who are tracking are saying are absolutely um, corrosive and dangerous. And on the one hand, on the other hand, there has been also over the decades a real push back against religion, which is of course such an important social adhesive, a social, emulsifier of sorts, like bringing people together. And I mean, I was listening to one particular atheist intellectual whom I follow and love, who was getting pushback from someone who was saying, given how important religion is for social cohesion, what do you have to say about that? I mean, you might be an atheist, but you can't argue that, religion does do sort of function. And he was admitting that, it's very difficult without religion to help create some of these social functions. So I'm just wondering, like, for you, do you see your book and do you see like what do you see for your children and grandchildren in terms of a world that's moving maybe more and more towards secularism? In some ways, that's a great thing. In other ways, it really leaves us all feeling to some extent isolated and lacking community. And are you hoping that people will come together around the book? Do you feel like what's the image you have for your kids and your grandkids going forward? How would you inculcate in them? Can you, like a Judaism that is the Judaism that you arrived at, can they get there without going through some of the things that you had to go through? What are your thoughts about your
Oh
children and
gosh,
grandchildren?
I hope they can. I
Yeah,
hope
so
they
what do you
can.
think?
And so, in conversation over the past few years with my children, most of them live in Israel, and most of my grandchildren live in Israel. So that already positions them in a culture that's more community. Um,
That's true.
yeah, I mean yeah,
Right.
from an early age. However, uh, what's most important is that I'm sharing with them a Judaism that allows them to be an active participant, not an observer. And if I have six children, and there are six different ways of honoring their creator, of honoring their appreciation of the Jewish law and rituals, their understanding of God. And what I tell all of them by role modeling and including them in certain of what I do in Yerushalayim is
Do
there's
they
no
come?
one. Yeah, some of them do come. My daughter, I remember one of my daughters, she just like, it's interesting. I have two daughters that live near me. One came, she absolutely loved it. And the people she met there, my other daughter who came said, if I come to you for Shabbat again and you're having a gathering, would you mind if I just stayed in your study/bedroom and read? Like, no, not at all. And that's my point. There's no one way to do this.
Hmm.
My six children, for the most part, at least most of my children, really feel supported by me in curating, in discovering, in exploring their own journey. What's of paramount importance to me, it's like every generation of parents wants to give their kids what they felt they lacked. I mean, that's like a way of being a parent. So
Yeah.
everything that I just described, I share with my children, whatever your inner authentic self is, honor it, share it with us where you feel safe with the family. Honor you may not be as religious as this, you may not be as observant as that, but show honor to where you come from. And thirdly, whatever I can do as one of your parents to help you get to know your deeper self, your soul, that still small voice, that is my legacy to you. Lean on me to help guide you
Yeah.
into that place.
So,
That is
so
of utmost importance.
Yiska, are your children, the six of them, still in the Orthodox world?
I would say it's split. I would say, um, like they're my six children, so some of them definitely not, some of them definitely yes, and the majority are like more in that grayish,
Mm-hmm.
especially in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I have two children who live in the States temporarily.
Mm.
So yeah, and they support each other. They have their own WhatsApp group, that no other family is involved, and they honor each other. And that is my legacy. That's my legacy.
So that's that voice that you heard when you were at the kotel at the wall, the voice that said, "Oh, the not," which is also a voice. You heard the voice saying, "I'm out of integrity. I can't be met in truth because I'm not in truth." And then, sometimes walking your path comes at a cost.
That's
Sometimes
right.
embracing your truth uh, is the karma has, or as it were, has been set in place, and there are karmic seeds that have been planted, and there's not any way now to live without that karmic price that you'll have to pay for choices that were made, let's say, out of integrity, or choices that were made by a culture that forced one, or whatever it might be. But your legacy is to live in truth and to live in connection, and that you continue to model this, showing up to be open-hearted and to be able to come to the tradition, asking it to open your heart, and then giving it to others to open their heart. So the teachings of the book, right, are that invitation, right, to kind of enter into this place of
Yes.
truth and connection as well. For the listeners that don't know, like, in addition to buying the book, you also have been a longtime teacher at an amazing institution in Jerusalem called Pardes. Can you talk a little bit about that community and what it's meant to you?
Pardes, what it means to me is it role models as an institution the embodiment of what my book is. It's a they say non-denominational. I would even push it a little and say they really are post-denominational, but let's not get caught up with post or non. They invite people in the true sense of pluralism, different diverse ways, different ages, different views, and what the gelling agent, the what really gels everyone together is either a love of text or wanting to have a love of text. And everything's based around us coming together. It's like a limud conference that's either a 1 semester, 2 semesters, 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. We have all these different mini programs, but it's coming together in the Beit Midrash, in the study hall, grappling with texts that could be 5 years old or 500 years old, going into the classrooms and discussing them, really exploring them, and coming out feeling I have a greater sense of my history. I have a greater literacy of my own language. I understand that I don't have to have black and white answers, that actually that's not a real way to live, that the gray and Pardes, I love Pardes for that. And to just complete the I would be remiss if I didn't mention, not only do I love my students, I love my students, and every one of them feels my love. I also love my colleagues. I am so humbled and honored to work with what I would consider to be, in my 50 plus years of cultivating some kind of scholarship, I'm working with the highest caliber of scholarship. A lot of them teach areas that I'm not interested in, and I'm teaching an area that many of them are not interested in. But we all amaze each other
Mm.
with our commitment, our dedication to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, and share that with our students. And our students tell us that they feel supported by all their teachers with our enthusiasm and our care for them, with our own high caliber of scholarship. And Pardes has been a big support for this book, a very big support.
Yeah, I could see that. And yeah, Leon's incredible. And you already mentioned
Yeah.
David Bernstein, who was when I was a young kid, David Bernstein and his wife Ricky were at in Ramaz in New York City, where I went. And we remember when they made Aliyah and they moved to Israel. And so David was a part of this journey, and so many of our colleagues. And so it's great to give them the credit where it's due. I just wanted to ask you, just coming back, I know that we started a little bit late, so we're going to go a little longer, but we only have, maybe 10 more minutes or so. But I just wanted to I just find that your story, and then the Torah that you're teaching, is so beautiful. And what I'm wondering though is, Was there a moment, I've often spoken about post-traumatic God disorder or post-traumatic religion disorder, or kind of like people who have, you know, it's kind of said jokingly, but I think that for me personally, there are a lot of features of my own return to Jewish life after my own decade away, um, that were marked with, some of it was me and some of it was the tradition, and kind of wrestling with which pieces I had brought in, which pieces were already there in the tradition, as you said before. Did you go through a period, a dark night, where you were angry at God, or where you went through thinking that you were going to walk away and never come back to the tradition, or that the tradition had failed you? Or what was it? Is that any of that resonate with you? Or
Oh,
you were,
yeah.
it does, yeah.
I would say in 1991, as I write in my memoir, as Saddam Hussein was firing rockets, I mean, I've been through many missiles and rockets in Israel. This is not my first war right now. But in 1991, when Saddam Hussein was firing what could have been a chemical warhead, I mean, he threatened that, and we all had masks, and the kids had, kids' masks. I felt that what the way I was living now was under attack as well. It was under attack by my own not living a life of truth. Like I wanted it to be true, and what I was teaching, I believed was true, just I felt excluded from it. And that when I left, there was a lot of anger. I wasn't angry at God, though. It's interesting because you asking me specific about God. I wasn't angry at God. I was angry at the rabbis who shamed me in public, who excluded me, who insulted me, who threatened my own children's well-being if I didn't leave the old city of Jerusalem. They were going to embarrass my children. And I mean, it was terrible. Thank God over the years I've been able to forgive. I mean, to hold on to that hurt and then finally to let it go. I have asked God, though, and I've learned through Rabbi Nachman's practice of hitbodedut, which Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan believes it didn't start with Rabbi Nachman, it started with the original patriarchs and matriarchs, where we're in this personal conversation with the divine. I did push on God, so to speak, and say, really? Really? Like if I were you, I would have done this a little bit differently. And then the answer is, yeah, but you're not, So with my what the beauty of healing, and I do believe, over the years there has been so much healing in so many ways, is I
Mhm.
really do see everything had to happen for me to be with you tonight. And I'm not just being like pedestrian about this or cute. I really mean it. I was not always as compassionate. I was not always as patient. I'm sure family members would be the first to vouch. I was very absolutist years ago because that was my protection. That was my security blanket that I knew would not last. Now I'm so, like as one of my children said, you're just so much easier to be with. It's like you're just holding space for so much and so many people, and not only Jewish people. Not I love humanity, and and again, I don't want to sound just like nice, but it is nice. All the pain of exclusivity, the pain of confusion, the pain of hurt, of being publicly shamed, all of that, as I began to work and see it as a teaching tool, like what is being asked of me, brought me to a place, David, I really don't believe without it I couldn't be. And that's why I can hold so many different, different kinds of people. And I see that in my garden. I see that in my garden. Well, talk about a rainbow flag. It is in the month of Pride. It makes the rainbow flag look like one color, like monocolor, compared to what I have in my garden. Different languages, different ideas, but we connect because we
Mhm.
connect on a soul. This is what I
Mhm.
seek. And I just want to conclude this piece with a teaching from Reb Simcha Bunim. He said, how do you know in the quest for authenticity, which is Mikhail Rosen's, may he rest in peace, his book of Reb Simcha Bunim in the 20th century, 19th century in Poland. He said, how do you know you're not becoming egotistical? Like it's all about me. That's what I'm supposed to be, right? Or my authentic self. And this has been my guide, this teaching along these years now. If what you believe you're encountering is your authentic self, if it's your soul, if it's that piece of God in you, then when you go out into the world, you'll see that in everybody else. You won't even have to try. The work is trying to connect to that piece inside of you.
Hmm.
If you go out into the world, this one's too religious, this one's not religious enough, this one's not Jewish, this one is Jewish, this person not living in Israel, this person does that. If that's what I see, fragmentation, it means I have not, I have not encountered my soul. I've encountered my ego.
Hmm.
And that's been a big guide for me. And I wouldn't have, I doubt sincerely, I would argue that I would not get to this place, have arrived where I am now, which is a gentle place. It's a soft place without those years that were very difficult.
Well, if one looks at like the bibliography here and then the end notes in your book, and those who will buy the book, God willing, it's just you know, so much is taken from so many different other places, other gardens, as it were. Like there are tons of seeds here in your garden, and they're all, as you said, not monocolor, but very intellectually and spiritually diverse and harmonizing in you and in your heart. It's like so many, David Shook and like Schommersburg, and then like, Dober Pinson, and it's like, all over the Jewish world and beyond it intellectually. So I think that your work here was really aggregating and tending to this garden, intellectual and spiritual garden, and then to provide it for others, and you brought your own cultivated garden, as it were, as well, like what you learned over the years. And so what more could you give people other than what's moved you and what's touched you, and then what you've made from it, right? As you've integrated and as you asked, and as you continue to explore and cultivate. It's really a beautiful offering, Yiscah, to bring to the world at this moment. Are you tell us about where you, just before we leave, we know we're so acutely aware. I mean, I don't know, but I'm sure for you a thousandfold, but for me, I haven't been able to be present in New York. I mean, I'm in New York, but my heart's in Eretz Israel and in the region, obviously, and with my sister and my nephew and my friends and colleagues. And you have your family and you have students, and so is anything at this moment giving you hope in the possibility of the garden blooming and healing? And where are you with this in this moment?
The bigger part of me, the believing part of me, the trusting part of me, while I am concerned, especially about, I have a granddaughter who's an officer in search and rescue. So I don't even, yeah. Putting the obvious aside, I really do believe this is part of a much bigger picture that has yet to unfold and will be unfolding. And I derive that from my garden. Every morning when I go out into my garden at about 6:30 in the morning, the birds are chirping. It's quiet in my neighborhood, which is usually not so quiet, but it's quiet. And I notice everything that's new. And then what awaits me are surprises. Like I know I did not plant that calla lily. I planted one calla lily over here, and now another one's growing over there. So to live in what Heschel says, radical amazement, and this may be the Pollyanna in me, this is the idealist in me, this is also the believer in me, and the trusting in the bigger plan me. I really do believe that Israel as a modern political entity, we as the Jewish people, humanity has got to learn from all of this, which will then bring us as my own journey. See, I have my own journey to rely on. Because if you would have told me 40 years ago, 30 years ago, I could be this, how I am now, I would have said no, it would be impossible. So when I say this, it's not just, well, she believes in the prophecies, but really look what's happening with all the trauma and the death and the I do believe in the prophecies. I do believe there's a better world that we can move into. I have to. That's my personal theology. That's my life journey. So yeah, I'm not getting like a full night's sleep. I'm getting beeps. I know when there's a siren, and each of my kids check in with me when they can. And this one is here, this one is there. and my grandchildren and the army and going into the army and like my students, my community members, my friends. And then I say, David, how can I be here in New York right now? I need to be home. But I'm supposed to, but see, and that's part of the plan. I'm supposed to be here. This is where the divine plan has brought me right now. And that's how I can be here and be focused and present in being here.
Well, I mean, we could wind up opening up a whole other conversation about the spiritual self and the physical self and the situated self, the tribal self and the spiritual self that
Oh,
transcends all those boundaries. But I think
let's
for
do that on your
now,
podcast. Let's do
yeah,
that on your
we'll do it
podcast.
podcast or just we'll study it. I mean, it's remarkable because I think that what you've managed to do, and which I have tremendous kavod, respect for, and admiration, and which is something that animates my own ministry and my Torah and the Torah that I learned from Reb Zalman and my own journey, is like to use Jewish wisdom, right? It is Jewish wisdom because it's rooted in the Jewish experience, it's rooted in the Jewish language, Jewish cultures, Jewish civilization, but it's not only for Jews, obviously. It's universal in its
Mm.
application because it's dealing
Oh,
with the deep structure, what it is to be a human being. And
yes.
at the same time, right, we're also living in bodies, in time and in space. And the political realities that are on the ground are political realities, and which can just hope that we come to see a day, I think, where your garden, which is so full of the diversity of the divine, is a micro of that greater macro which our prophet spoke, which is that uval
Yeah.
kulam, that everyone will come together, and v'avyotim el har kachi v'simachtem b'veit tfilati olosem v'tzivchem, right? Ki beiti beit tfilai kavod l'chol amim, that one day that all of Jerusalem and all of Israel and all of the world will be a place where, as you said so beautifully, each of the plants, each of the flowers is a part of the divine garden. So you've done your job so far, Yiscah, and you continue to do it, and God should bless you and with your upcoming birthday with many more years of cultivating the
Mm.
beauty of the garden and sharing your deep Torah and your courageous. I mean, it's so courageous to bring a group of people together and to do a visualization. I mean, it shouldn't be that courageous, right? I mean, every religious tradition in the world has visualizations. But in Judaism, it's like, say people close your eyes and they're like, why? Go to sleep? What am I saying? The Shema? What's going on here? No, I'm just asking you to tune in, and it helps when you close your eyes. You could do it with your eyes open, but you have such courage. You have omnets, really. It's a lot of amitzah. It's very strong. It's very courageous of you to bring these well springs to the people in your garden. So I'm looking forward. I haven't been there. I keep missing the garden. On my next trip, God willing, if it isn't raining shrapnel, God willing, which I hopefully it won't be, we'll be able to sit together in the garden
We
and
will. We
and
will.
cultivate the
With
inner
the
flame.
yes, with the Shekhinah's help, we will.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Right. And thank
Toda.
you
Thank
to all
you.
of you who are watching here. I think there are a couple of uh okay, a couple of things I'll say before they go. Such a wonderful conversation. Love the book, Yiscah, from that Diane Gottlieb wrote that. It was a privilege to be here. May we be blessed with Yiscah's teaching for many years. Amen. And she then thanked us in the 90 seconds. That's great. Rabbi Sally Shore Wittenberg.
Oh,
And
she's in Rabbi. Oh, Rabbi Sally.
yeah, she was
Hi.
here. And Robin Saknoff said, thank you. Judy Brown said, you always enrich my life and my journey. I just ordered your book. Looking forward to encountering the divine with your help. Mark Horn, who's a member of the Roman community, said, thank you for teaching. Thanks for you. Thank you. Great book. Thanks for teaching yesterday. He was at your teaching yesterday. Tammy Cohen, love you, Yiscah. My favorite two teachers, David too. Thank you, Tammy. And it was an honor to learn here with you and at Romu from Eden and okay, and so many other things. So loved it so much. Bless you. So we're gonna close down the chat because we could be here chatting with this beautiful group. And Yiska, only good things to you. Many brachot, many blessings,
Amen.
and
Many
many,
brachot.
many, many books get sold.
Amen.
And
Amen.
amen. Amen. Thank you.
And may the one who blesses be blessed.
Amen to you too.